Full story. I feel like my husband has been having a long-term emotional affair with his brother's wife. I used to feel very confident in myself until I met my husband. His behavior and views on things would start to wear on my self-esteem and make me feel insecure in our relationship. Just some background history. When we first started dating, he would still hang around with a female I knew he slept around with. She was a part of his circle of friends. I wasn't very comfortable with this, but being young and early on in the relationship, I tried to not let it get in the way of anything. Just dealing with this so early on made the relationship not feel right to me. I expressed my concern to him about how I felt. He just couldn't understand how it made me uncomfortable and it made him upset. I feel now as an older adult, I should have just walked away at this point if I personally couldn't accept it. He would tell me she was an important person in his life and I would have to accept that she would always be there. I was not happy about what felt like an ultimatum from him. He didn't tell me to leave, but it sure felt like that was the only choice I was given if I wasn't going to be okay with this. He then tried to get me to hang out with her and his other friends, but it was not a pleasant experience for me. This girl clearly felt a certain type of way about me being his girlfriend, which further validated my concerns about staying friends with someone you mess around with. This girl would be rude anytime I was around her. I'd say I tried about 2x to hang out with her and she wouldn't even look up at me to acknowledge my presence of even being there so I could greet her. I told him I didn't like it to begin with, but I'm trying to force myself to be and was done trying to be okay with it at this point. She wound up messaging me on social media to tell me she didn't know what her problem was with me but that my husband had said something to her about it and she was ready to be over whatever her problem was. She has to accept me? I didn't understand. If they wanted to be in each other's life so much and slept around, why aren't they just together then? Fast forward a couple months later, my then BF, now husband, broke off our relationship. He mentioned not being happy with me and didn't want any problems about who he hung around with. I was devastated, but respected his decision and walked away. Fast forward about 6 months down the line, I would curiously look him up on social media from time to time to see what he was up to. I did still miss him, but I would have never reached out to him again. I noticed there were many pictures of him hanging back out with the girl, plus another girl. The bulk of this story pertains to her, which appeared to be her friend, along with other guys. I noticed pictures a couple months later of him just hanging around solo with the other girl, the new one. I could clearly see from pictures that she was friends with the girl he slept around with. Although odd, because she's friends with the original friend he slept with, I assumed him and the new friend most likely had something going on once I noticed he made their picture his profile picture, but none of my business anymore, right? Just a mental note I kept. It's now going on almost a year later and I was beginning to move on emotionally at this point, when I received several messages from him telling me he feels he made a huge mistake and can't stop thinking about us, needed to see me, etc. Long story short, being the vulnerable girl I was, I met up with him and the rest is history. We wound up getting back together. His friend, that he slept around with, called him a few times while I was with him, stirring my bad feelings back up again, but then it seemed to stop for good. However, there was her friend, the other girl lingering around now, the one from his profile picture. This is where it gets odd to me. He told me they started hanging around a lot while we weren't together and that she was really cool, I'd love her and he wanted me to hang out with her. I really wanted to love her. I tried talking to this girl and she was just very standoffish with me from the beginning. I would try making conversation with her, get to know her, but she was extremely quiet around me and very one-worded. Naturally, I asked him if he had anything going on with her while we weren't together, but he told me no. Come to find out within a month's time later, he discloses to me that this girl is all of a sudden pregnant with his brother's child, whom was already engaged to another woman. I was in complete shock. I didn't even know she knew his brother, let alone was sleeping around with him while he was engaged to someone and now pregnant? I had so many questions. Why did my husband fail to tell me the part that she was messing around with his brother when I questioned him if he himself had anything going on with her? Why were there so many pictures of them together and not even one of her and his brother if they were the ones messing around? Why did he take her to his Christmas work party when she was messing around with his brother? It seems the other way around, that he had a relationship going on with her instead. The whole thing was weird to me and just rubbed me wrong, but I began to second-guess myself and try to convince myself of overanalyzing the situation too much. So now his brother kicks the girl he was engaged to the curb and marries this girl within a few months. I found it odd how accepted she was into the family and just moved right into my husband's house as he and his other siblings still lived at home. I felt even more leery about this girl knowing that she slept around with a man that was to be married, but everyone welcomed her with such open arms. I felt like I was truly missing something and was the only one that felt very estranged with this girl. When I mentioned to my husband, how could she do that? He defended her saying she wasn't aware that his brother was engaged and she's having the baby. My now husband, still then BF, and I wind up moving in together around this time and decided to make our first big purchase together, buying a car. We were still in the process of looking as we hadn't found anything we loved and we both agreed on yet. Well, one day he called me while I was out somewhere and let me know that he decided to bring this girl with him to look for our car that day. He also thought he found the one, even though I was not there with him and was very impulsive about going with the car they found together and wanting to text me pictures of it to see if I was good with it because he planned on making the deal right then and there. I was livid. Was I wrong in being mad about this? At first I asked him why he decided to bring her with him to look at cars and also how he could even think about making this purchase without me even being there and test driving the car, getting in it, etc. All I was going to get were pictures? He in turn became upset that I was upset and said out loud with her sitting right next to him, "Now you're mad because I took so-and-so with me?" It upset me that he vocalized in front of her that I was upset about him taking her with him. He just couldn't understand where I was coming from and why that bothered me. That was one of the first incidents I've encountered involving this girl. I feel like there are boundary lines that are being crossed and neither of them see that. I don't like their relationship with one another and I don't like the vibes she gives off to me. I just get a bad feeling. That was the only incident that I voiced my concern that I was not happy about, and over the years all the other things I've encountered between them I began to internalize and keep to myself, but it has ate at me and I wound up having a falling out with this girl years later due to her continued stance and off-putting behavior with me. I find her rude and disrespectful and I don't like her relationship with my husband at all. Here are a few more things that has happened over the years. She got into a fender bender and was all choked up and decided to contact my husband about it instead of her own, my husband's brother. My husband left his job to run to her rescue, letting me know he had to console her when getting to her because she was all shaken up. When she found out I was expecting our first child, she put her hands over her eyes and started hysterical crying, and our announcement became about her as my husband grabbed her and started hugging her to console her. It was the oddest moment. My husband didn't even hug me when I announced my pregnancy to him. This girl would not stop crying, but showed no love towards me. Not a hug or anything, she was just focused on my husband. This made me feel very bad and just completely confused. I wound up losing that pregnancy in my second trimester, and when I did and was a royal mess, I didn't even get an "I'm sorry for your loss" from her. A person who was so emotionally invested by crying when she found out I was expecting. She would have texting conversations with my husband throughout the years. I would monitor his messages from time to time. I didn't see anything wildly inappropriate in the messages when I had looked, but didn't like the overall nature of their conversations. They just seemed overly friendly with a lot of playfulness and ha 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 going on in the messages. One day I was out somewhere and when I called my husband just to say hello, he told me she was at our house with her kids. She now had two by his brother by this time. I thought it was odd that I never received the memo that she was coming over my house in the first place, and coincidentally while I'm not there. Why didn't she contact me as her sister-in-law, as a woman, to tell she would like to come over my house? And why didn't my husband give me a heads up that she was coming over either? Why was this something planned through her and my husband, yet I didn't know about it until I called him just to say hi, and then I'm finding out she's physically in my home as I'm talking to him? This also happened the other way around, where I would call my husband around the time he's supposed to be heading home from work, and there were times he would tell me he stopped over at his brother's house before heading home. I'd purposely ask how his brother was as an indirect way of knowing if anyone else was in the house with them, and he would tell me that his brother was at work and not at the house yet. Therefore he would just visit her and his nephews. Another time we went to a family party at a park and he told me he had to use the bathroom. He was gone a little while, so I went to eventually look for him. After searching different areas of the park, I spotted them both on the other side of the park talking in private. When I walked up to them, they just stopped talking and wouldn't carry on the conversation. This made me extremely uncomfortable, but I was afraid to confront it again to my husband because he's allowing it all, so I just felt like I was in a bad situation and I couldn't trust if he would run back to her and tell her I said something about it. I didn't want her having the satisfaction of knowing she was making me feel uncomfortable. Another time I happened to walk into a room right when he was passing by her, and for some reason he felt the need to graze his hand along her lower back in passing. Is all this normal? Could these incidents be purely innocent and I'm being over the top or looking too deep into them? I'd never want to believe my husband has a thing going on with his brother's wife, but could this be an unspoken, emotional affair that they both have going and think because it's not physical, they can both just get away with it in public and I'm made to look like I'm crazy in what I'm observing? I eventually brought these things up. He told me that they planned on getting together to hang out one day with her, our kid and her 2 kids. Sarcastically, I asked if I was invited to hang out with them. I then at that point brought up what I've observed over the years. I told him I get weird vibes about them and I didn't understand why she always feels the need to go through him and I'm constantly excluded from every interaction. He became agitated by what I was saying and told me he didn't see a problem with their contact. He then rolled his eyes and walked away from me. I took that as the ultimate form of rejection and just a lack of respect for me. My last straw with her was when she invited my daughter to sleep over her house and my husband told me about it. I said, did you tell her to contact ME about having our daughter sleep over her house, or is all that going to just be arranged between you and her? I said I'm not sending my daughter over to her house while she won't communicate with me, it's absurd. He told me he let her know already to contact me because he knew how I felt about it at this point. I waited the entire week to hear from her, and when I never did, I decided to reach out to her, telling her my husband mentioned to me that she asked for my daughter to sleep over her house. She responded back to me with, yes, he did ask me to inform you, but honestly I didn't feel a need to since I've already discussed it with him. It was at this point that I had had it with her. I asked her what her issue was with me, and I also mentioned how awkward she has made it over the years by contacting my husband only. I didn't even make mention of all the other things listed above. She then continued to tell me she had a close relationship with my husband and doesn't see anything wrong with their contact and will continue to just go through him. I showed her response to my husband in disbelief and asked him WTH her deal was because since they're so close, he should know what the hell is going on here. He just said, I don't know. The next day this woman contacted my husband again, and met up with him while he was at work to vent to him about me because I told her my daughter will not be going to her house and that she's to go through ME from now on instead of contacting my husband all the time if she wants our daughter to be around her cousins, and that pissed her off. When my husband told me he met up with her the next day, I asked him why he felt the need to leave work to meet up with her so she can talk about ME, his wife, and why she feels so comfortable and entitled doing so. I told him this here. This is the problem. You don't respect me and you've been communicating that all along in your actions and what you allow. It has been years since this happened and I have refused to allow my child around this woman. Therefore my daughter hasn't been around her boys either. This has caused major issues in my marriage as my husband does not agree with how I feel and says he just can't deal with it anymore. BC my daughter isn't growing up with her cousins. He recently asked me for a divorce. He betrayed me 4 years ago by sexting and receiving nude pictures of his ex-girlfriend. I wound up finding out I was pregnant with our second daughter just a few weeks after this incident. I didn't know what to do. He apologized profusely. I wanted it all to disappear and I tried to accept his apology and move on from it. Just a few months ago something told me to look in his phone and lo and behold I see dirty messages between him and his coworker where she was asking him to play in her wetness, to which he responded that he would love to. When I confronted him about it, he told me we're done, hasn't been happy with me in a long while and wants a divorce. That divorce turned into an I'm not sure if I want to be with you anymore on his end, and it's been that way for going on 2 months now. We are completely broken. I can't help but just reflect on my last 13 years with this person and wonder how the hell I ever got here. I feel like a nobody and just completely confused by it all.